Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our podcast, Your Gardening Questions from Plant Talk Radio. To help keep this podcast free, we're partnering with Stoke Seeds. More than just a listing of vegetable and flower seeds, the Stoke Seeds website is a complete resource center with valuable information on seed starting, planting, and harvesting, plus all the gardening accessories you need to make your garden the envy of the neighborhood. Pre-order your free 2018 gardening guide today from stokeseeds.com. Cultivating successful growers for generations. We'll have more to come from Stoke Seeds in the next few weeks. Now, on to today's question. This is from Clay, who lives in Westlake, Ohio, and he wants to talk about grapes and blackberries, and I would think that would be a really good grape growing area.
It is.
He says, Fred, I'm new to grapes and blackberries. I planted several bushes and vines last year. However, I do not know what the pruning cycle is and what type of fertilizer I should use. Okay. He goes on to say the blackberries are the Arapaho thornless, and the grapes are the Concord and Himro, okay. Himro. He says, thanks for your help. Any suggestions?
Yes. I have to plead almost significant in lack of knowledge in this case, in terms of specifics. But generally, I can help this much. You mentioned Westlake and many areas of Ohio that are gravel underlaid are excellent for grapes. The temperatures and so on can be all the things they are, but where grapes grow best is they have exceptionally good drainage in the soil, where the roots can be constantly moist and never wet. Now, we'll hope that he has provided that, and we're going to deal with grapes first. Concord is one of the old standards. I do not happen to know the specifics on any given grape. I can tell you, though, that they flower and fruit on new tissue, which means that, starting late March, early April, they will start to grow from a bud tip and grow on out. Now, we want to control that as the grape grower. Regardless of our purposes and use of the grape, we're going to cause that plant to start over again. It is going to put out new tissue if we've cared for it right, and that tissue will bear flowers and then fruit. So we're going to cut back on Concords, and I'm going to say most other grapes, to or toward. We'll call it the main stem. Now, it depends on how you've planted them, but let's just say there is a post with wires extending both ways to another post and so on, depending on circumstances, and the grape has been planted either at the post or mid-wire. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. The single stem comes up. You train branches to go out across the bottom wire. Then about 18 inches above that or so, you train grape stems to go out across that wire. And then the third wire system usually is what's happening. And that grew, let's just say in his first year, maybe 3 to 5 feet. In another year of establishment, they can grow 7 to 10 feet. You want to cut back toward that main stem, leaving 3, 5, maximum 7 buds. So you're going to be taking off, in his case, maybe as little as 3 feet. In an older, more mature rose or grape, you may be taking off 5 to 7 feet. You simply want to cut back, seemingly brutally, and it is, but it's for purpose. You cut back to 3, 5, or 7 buds that will then open in the spring and extend, do the flowering, fruiting, and so on. And this will keep the plant rejuvenated. You'll keep it in control, and all things will be better. So that's the pruning. Grapes are, and I'm going to throw blackberries in here, they are bearing plants now. And in general, with fertilizers, and this is going to be only general, in things that bear and or have flower, we go higher in the phosphate and potash content of the fertilizer. Mm-hmm. In trees that we don't care about the flower or who are trying to get any plant off first base and growing handsomely, we're going to up the nitrogen increment. So I'm going to say in general, and he's going to need to find out more specific things, he's going to want to use a 1-2-2 proportion of fertilizer. In other words, 1 part nitrogen, 2 parts phosphate and potash. Now, if he wants to get really fancy, he should send in some soil samples, tell the sampling company that he's wanting to grow grapes and or blackberries and so on. They can then assay his soil. They can tell him almost absolutely what fertilizer blend to use. Sometimes it's very hard to find, sometimes not. But by and large, for the average gardener, a blackberry and a grape will be watered thoroughly and let drain. But then back to the fertilizer, we're going to let them grow handsomely, but not fast. So lower in nitrogen, higher in phosphate and potash. Now, that's the pruning on the rose and a little bit about fertilizing both. Blackberries, I am not overwhelmingly familiar with. Each variety has a little bit different trimming status. Each plant grows a little differently. Now, I know in red raspberries, there's a lot of dying back. Black raspberries are different. I'm going to, rather than, let's say second guess, I'm going to send him to Ohio State Extension in theory, and go through your county, your county phone book, find Ohio State Extension, get a hold of the agent, and or by computer now through BuckeyeGardening.com and so on, you can access fact sheets on about every plant care, plant kind. And let your fingers do the walking, or your voice, or either one, or both, and get more specifics on blackberries, and then maybe even down to varietals, because grapes, blackberries, other bramble fruits and so on are big in Ohio. There may even be a bulletin on the whole thing capsulized in one cover. I don't happen to know that, but that's where to find this information.
I imagine, and I'm going to ask you, when you decide you want to get into raspberries or blackberries, something, this is something you have to be patient with. I understand, because they're not going to bear fruit the first couple of years. Is that right?
They will bear fruit, Mark. Now let's just say they will bear some fruit, but they need to mature. And I'm going to throw asparagus into this category, and rhubarb. These are perennial plants that feed and nourish us too. In asparagus, it's best to plant that thing and just stand there and savor that growth mentally for the first spring, second spring, and only in the third spring would you start to cut some asparagus. And then after year 3, you can cut a whole bunch for quite a period of time because the plants are established. Well, it's about the same in essence on other plants. Blackberries probably will take 2 and 3 years to get up to full maturity. Grapes can be productive in the first year. I had one last year that gave me 2 little bunches, enough to flavor my palate for just those couple of minutes. But each grape is going to grow a little differently and have a little bit of need, each other thing that likewise. And it's all in written form available to us. And where I'm good on maple trees, not so good on fruits, let's just go from there back to extension.
Thanks again for listening to the podcast. If you have a question for Fred, go ahead and email us, fred@planttalkradio.com. And for the best selection of vegetable, flower, and herb seeds available, go to www.stokeseeds.com. Pre-order your free 2018 gardening guide today from stokeseeds.com. Cultivating successful growers for generations.